for me when you did that is because I was running a day job that was making a lot of money at the time, and I was funding something that I never had anybody to account to. I'd say.
Yes.
I'd say
So,
there's no you that's checking my money. So give me some.
So in hindsight, one of the things I do, again, I ask myself, like, would I have been better off just abandoning my other company and committing to the road early on and just raising some larger amount, $6 million, right? So one of my good friends and advisors is a guy who's the product manager at LinkedIn. So he was number like, I don't know, 11 or something, and he left shortly after they went IPO. One of the things he said to me that's interesting about the dynamics of where you raise money is that in the Valley, he said they will fund you, no matter what you ask for or what you think you're worth or whatever, if you get a VC to bite, they will fund you to the level that they believe is appropriate for you to be successful. So you may think you need $2 million, and they will look at you, and with their decades of experience and however many exits and whatever, they'll just come in and say, we appreciate that you think you need 2, but you need 6. So we're going to give you 6. And you'll say, I don't want to give up the equity. And they'll say, well, then let's figure out a way to tier it. And if you succeed, great. But when you don't, then we're going to take more equity on the back end. Or you could just take the 6 now and we'll take this equity, right? So that's the way that discussion goes. Coming back to like locally here, the mindset is, and in most places, the mindset is very different. It tends to be much more conservative, and it tends to be much more sort of traction and cash flow. So, you know, you raise a little bit of money, you show a little progress, you go raise a little bit more money. The downside means you're in a fundraising mode the entire time. One of the questions I ask myself is like, would I have been better off just trying to raise a big chunk of money, focusing on the problem? Would we have gotten further along? I was fortunate enough that, you know, operationally, I had gotten my company to the point where I didn't need to be as involved in the day-to-day operations of my business that was generating the cash. So I could spend my time building up the product and taking ownership of the product. Now, the downside was that then my consulting company stagnated. So as I shifted my attention to Social Toaster, the other consulting firm did not grow, and then over the course of 18 months, actually started to lose customers. And so, you know, you kind of have to make. So I was at a point where I had to make a choice, right? At that point, try to really, and for me, everything kind of worked out time-wise. I was able to get the funding, I was able to find a buyer, but I was getting to the point where I was going to have to say, we're going to have to table Social Toaster for 6 months, get the core business back on track, right? Or, you know, figure something out. So, you know, it's hard when you have a day job. You definitely, I would say, there's going to come a point where you will need to take that jump, right? And I generally, my advice would be, you know, more of my experience has been, you know, get to that minimum viable product, and then try to make sure you have a window yourself of say 6 months where you can commit to it fully and either go sell the product and get customers, and that's probably the path you should take. You should try to get some sort of customer traction, proof of concept revenue, that not just the product works, but there's a market for it. And then you can take the next step, which is going and seeking external funding, if that's what makes sense. Now, I would tell anyone in this room, avoid outside funding at all, if at all possible. If you can self-fund, if you can finance and really think you can get it off the ground through debt financing, exhaust those options first, because, you know, when you bring in outside money, you're no longer so for 15 years, I was my own boss. I did whatever I felt like. I am mostly the boss now, right? But I'm really not. Like, at the end of the day, as long as everything's good, everyone's happy with me. But when things are not good, I have a board that I am responsible to, and they can fire me if they want to, you know.
I don't know if anybody saw last night's Silicon Valley, but they brought up.
We were talking about it. I was like, I should have watched you for coming to this.
That point that they were making in that show last night about being careful about how much you do take, because it's going to, the future valuation, what it is, could be more than you can.
Yes.
Could grow your business at that rate, and you could screw yourself. Is that really true?
Yeah, absolutely. And so smart investors will know that, and it depends on, again, where you raise your money and what the nature of it is, and you know. So, You know, so regionally, so if you raise money from an angel, and the angel invests, and there are a number of good groups, so in doing 150 pitches, I probably, like Leo, know every investor in the Mid-Atlantic region at this point. My investors, some of them include, Kevin Plank is one of my investors. I have, you know, there's another guy who's well known, Frank Bonsall Jr. is one of the founders of NEA, which is one of the largest, you know. So I have a lot of guys that have been fortunate to, you know, have their faith, to be able to put their faith in me, put some money into what we've been doing. But if you raise from a seasoned angel investor, most angel investors have an expectation of getting 3x a return on their investment. Anything beyond that is a home run. They also then tend to be fairly conservative, and they strive for a higher win percentage. So they want 2 out of 3 investments to succeed, and with the average return being a 3x return. So most of those guys, and when you look at where companies sell, most companies will exit between $10 and $20 million, right? There's some earlier stage where they'll get you to a certain point, and then they'll try to have a transaction or something happen where they can exit at like 5 or 10. There's some companies that kind of specialize in that, but in general, you know, most angel investors will invest in you thinking that your company is probably going to exit at 10 to 20 million. So, you know, that can make sense if they put, you know, say they do put 2 million into you. Let's say that you convince them that you're worth 4 or 5, right? So there the math kind of works, that if you sell for 15 to 20, they're going to get their 3x, right? But if you raise 7, and you raise 7 on whatever the multiple is, so there's some lingo here. When you talk to investors, they're going to talk about a dollar amount on a dollar amount, so like 7 on 10. That means you raise $7 million on a $10 million pre-money valuation. And then the way the math works is your post-money valuation, grossly oversimplified, is going to be $7 million plus $10 million is $17 million. And so your post-money valuation is $17 million if you raise 7 on 10. The dilution that happens is 7 million divided by 17 million. So whoever puts the 7 in on 10 is going to end up taking 7 over 17 as the percentage of equity that they earn. So that's how you can determine your dilution and kind of how all that is impacted. So they are that is absolutely correct. So if you know you start to get to these higher levels, so like I'm at a point where like if I raise 10 to 12, I'm probably going to raise 10 to 12 on like a 30 million or 40 million valuation. So now at that level, institutional investors, they want a 10x return for the most part. Right? VCs want to know that if they put, now they expect that only 1 in 10 of their companies will succeed, or 2 in 10 will succeed. So they're expecting 8 out of the 10 companies they invest in will fail. So they need to get a 10x return on the 2 that succeed. That's how their math works. So in order to get a 10x return at that level, so if I took in that money, I took in $10 million.
What period of time is that?
I'm sorry?
Over what period of time?
So that's a different thing. So then that's something called IRR, the internal rate of return, that the different companies, VCs, look at. So the internal rate of return factors time into the equation. And so most VCs will have some metric for what their target IRR is, which basically tells you the time frame that they're willing to wait out before they see the return. In general, most investors are savvy enough to expect that it takes about 7 years to have an exit, 5 to 7 years. 10 on the outside. Very few, you know, VCs want to wait more than 10 years, but some of them, it just depends on the fund, and they have, every investor has what they call a thesis, which is how their philosophy on investment. So one of the fundamental things about raising money is you need to understand what each investor's thesis is, and then you need to align your pitch and your presentation, or I mean, ideally it's not you lying and aligning, ideally there is alignment, right? But that's going to be indicative, that's going to help determine whether or not you're able to raise money from them.
Have you explored possibilities of joining forces with established companies rather than professional investors?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of strategies for moving your company forward. A very good one is if you can in fact find like a key client that's willing to basically be a customer and to fund you as a customer. Those deals and relationships are great when you can get them. In fact, if I can highlight Neil here to some extent, right? He's got a startup, he has a product that he's just taken to market, and he has such an initial client that's a very well-known client. They're getting value from the software, he's getting some income from them. So, if you're fortunate enough that you can do that, now that works well if you have a product that's like an enterprise product where the value, the dollars that a company is willing to pay for the use of that technology is high enough to where it can sort of fund the needs of the company. But if you're dealing with more of a consumer-based product or a product that has a reliance on a larger volume of customers, then you will, I always wondered at what point do you decide you need to raise outside money? And it becomes clear to you that you need to raise outside money when you realize that the volume of customers that you need, in order to sustain the business and grow, is higher than your personal ability to get the company to that point, if that makes sort of sense, right? So, for me, it was like I got to the point where all of a sudden I have 11 people that are necessary to just run the company. I have my product team. If I downsize my product team, I'm not innovating and producing and sustaining and supporting my clients that I had. And if I downsize my account managers who are keeping the clients happy, the clients aren't going to be happy, they're going to fire me. So now all of a sudden I'm sacrificing on innovation because my staff that I had and I was able to sort of sustain with the money I had coming in, that was it. I was tapped out. So if I was going to grow at all, I'd either hire salespeople and or hire more programmers, I just couldn't personally support it. So I had to go get outside money, right? If I had any single large client that maybe believed in us enough and wanted to take an equity position, that's a direction you can go. But those opportunities are sort of limited, in my opinion, to certain sort of scale of product dealing with a certain size client to where that type of thing can make sense.
And also strategic acquisitions as an example. If a big software company that's into social marketing, like an email marketing firm, might view you as an attractive long-term partner, I'm sure he's going to get several social toaster offers from strategic companies in the same industry.
Yeah. And so, any questions about that? I can talk about valuation because I think it's
Just a note, it's about 8:35 now, and we can certainly network till 9:30 or 10 and beyond, but the pizza is here, so